When a poor girl gave water to a stranger, she never imagined he would return years later with a secret that would shock everyone. What seemed like a fleeting moment of kindness would remain buried in her past for years, until one day, when that same stranger reappeared with a revelation that would leave her breathless. No one could have predicted how this simple act would transform not just her life, but the fate of everyone around her. Sometimes the smallest gestures create the most earth-shattering consequences. The sun beat down mercilessly on Maya's village, a place where poverty wasn't just a word, but a crushing daily reality. At just 12 years old, Maya's thin shoulders already carried the weight of adult responsibilities. Her family's small hut, with its crumbling walls, stood as a testament to their struggle. That scorching afternoon, Maya clutched her precious plastic bottle, the last water her family had until tomorrow's long trek to the communal well. Each drop was more valuable than gold in this drought-stricken wasteland. As she rounded the dusty path toward home, Maya spotted him. A man collapsed by the roadside, his expensive clothes now covered in dust, his lips cracked and bleeding from dehydration. He reached out a trembling hand, his eyes pleading more eloquently than words ever could. "Please," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Water." Maya froze. This stranger was clearly not from her village. His clothes, despite being dirty, spoke of wealth and a world beyond her imagination. Every instinct told her to keep walking, to protect the precious resource her family desperately needed. But something in his eyes, the raw humanity of his suffering, made her decision for her. With hands shaking from both hunger and compassion, Maya knelt beside him and offered her bottle. "Here," she said softly. "Take it." The stranger's eyes widened in disbelief as he accepted her offering, drinking deeply while Maya looked away to give him dignity in his moment of vulnerability. When he finished, gratitude transformed his face. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice stronger now. "Maya," she replied simply, already wondering how she would explain the empty bottle to her mother. "Maya," he repeated, as if committing it to memory. "I won't forget this." But as quickly as their paths had crossed, they diverged again. The stranger, now revived, thanked her once more before continuing his journey, disappearing into the shimmering heat waves on the horizon. What Maya didn't know was that this simple act of kindness would alter the course of her life forever. Maya watched the stranger's silhouette fade into the distance, his promise to remember her name carried away by the hot, dusty wind. She stood there longer than she should have, the empty water bottle dangling from her fingers, a reminder of what she had given and what her family would now lack. A peculiar feeling settled in her chest, something between pride and worry, as if she had participated in something significant but couldn't yet understand its meaning. When she finally returned home, her mother's reaction was exactly as she had feared. First concern, then disappointment, then quiet resignation. They would all drink a little less tonight. In a family where a sacrifice was as common as breathing, this was just one more small hardship to bear. Her younger brothers complained of thirst that evening, their small faces pinched with discomfort, and Maya felt the weight of her decision pressed down upon her shoulders. "I'm sorry," she whispered to her mother as they prepared the meager evening meal of rice and lentils. He looked like he was dying. Her mother's weathered hands paused in their work. "Kindness is never wasted," she said finally, "even when it costs us." The words offered little comfort as they rationed their dinner that night, but they would echo in Maya's mind for years to come. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and the memory of the mysterious stranger faded like a dream upon waking. Life continued its relentless march forward, and Maya's world grew only more difficult with each passing year. The drought that had parched their region continued, turning once fertile fields into cracked, barren expanses. Families who could afford to leave did so, seeking better fortunes in crowded cities or distant relatives' homes. Those who remained, like Maya's family, clung to their land with a desperate hope that next season would bring rain, relief, and renewal. By 16, Maya's education, once her pride and secret hope for escape, became an unaffordable luxury. The village schoolteacher, Mrs. Lakshmi, had fought to keep her, recognizing the sharp intelligence behind her watchful eyes. She could be something. The teacher had insisted to Maya's parents during a home visit that Maya had overheard from behind the thin curtain separating their home's 2 rooms. She has a gift for learning. Her mathematics skills are exceptional, and she writes with clarity beyond her years. But gifts didn't put food on the table. When her father fell ill with a persistent cough that left him weak and gasping, unable to work in the fields, the decision was made without discussion. Maya would leave school and take whatever work she could find. The day she returned her textbooks, Mrs. Lakshmi pressed a small notebook into her hands. "To write your thoughts," the teacher said, her eyes glistening. "Don't let your mind grow dull, even if your circumstances are difficult." The next 4 years passed in a blur of menial jobs, washing clothes for wealthier families in neighboring villages, helping with harvests when the season allowed, selling small hand-woven baskets to tourists who occasionally ventured into their remote region. Her hands, once soft from holding pencils and turning the pages of borrowed textbooks, grew calloused and rough. Her skin darkened under the relentless sun, and the youthful softness of her face gave way to angular determination. At times, she would catch glimpses of her former classmates when they returned to the village during holidays. Some had gone on to higher education in the city, their clothes neat and fashionable, their speech peppered with English words and references to a world Maya could barely imagine. They greeted her with awkward smiles and vague promises to catch up sometime. But that sometime never came. The gulf between their lives and hers widened with each passing year, until they barely recognized each other across the divide. At night, she would sometimes take out her old school notebook, its pages dog-eared and yellowing, and trace the words she had written years ago. Dreams of becoming a doctor, of traveling beyond the dusty boundaries of her village, of being someone who helped others. All carefully preserved like pressed flowers, beautiful but lifeless. Sometimes she would add new entries, her handwriting more mature now, but the hopes more tempered. A small business, perhaps, enough money to ease her parents' burdens, a roof that didn't leak during the brief but intense rainy season. Her father's health continued to deteriorate, the medical expenses draining what little savings they managed to accumulate. Her brothers, now teenagers themselves, found sporadic work but not enough to sustain the family. Maya's mother aged before her eyes, worry etching permanent lines around her mouth and between her brows. By her 20th birthday, Maya had resigned herself to the life that circumstance had chosen for her. She still carried herself with quiet dignity, still offered what help she could to neighbors in need, still found small joys in the brilliant sunset colors that painted their village each evening. The ambitious girl who had once given water to a stranger was still kind, still generous, but the fire of hope that had once burned within her had dimmed to embers, kept alive only by her stubborn refusal to let it die completely. But while Maya had forgotten about the stranger, he had never forgotten about her. In a world far removed from her daily struggles, in gleaming offices and boardrooms where decisions affecting thousands were made with the stroke of a pen. A man who had once been dying of thirst on a dusty road carried the memory of a young girl's selfless act like a talisman. And he was making plans that would soon collide with Maya's carefully constructed resignation in ways neither of them could fully anticipate. The morning began like any other in Maya's life, the same routine she had followed for years now. She rose before dawn, her body automatically responding to the rooster's distant call before her mind fully awakened. The cool morning air carried the scent of wood smoke as neighboring homes prepared their first meals of the day. Maya splashed water on her face from the small basin, the shock of cold helping to clear the remnants of dreams from her mind. She helped her mother prepare breakfast, a simple meal of flatbread and watery lentils that would need to sustain them until evening. Her father sat in the corner, his breathing labored even in the early hours, a persistent reminder of why Maya's days unfolded as they did. Her younger brothers, Arjun and Devesh, now 17 and 15, wolfed down their portions before heading out to the fields where they worked as day laborers when work was available. "Don't forget to take your medicine," Maya reminded her father, placing the precious tablets next to his plate. Each one represented hours of her labor, carefully saved rupee by rupee. With a quick embrace for her mother and a gentle touch on her father's shoulder, Maya set off for Mrs. Sharma's house, where she worked as a housekeeper 6 days a week. The walk took nearly 45 minutes, following a dirt path that wound between parched fields and scattered homes. In the distance, the more substantial houses of the wealthier families stood apart, their painted walls and tiled roofs marking the division between those who struggled and those who merely worried. The wealthy family paid her just enough to keep her family afloat, though Mrs. Sharma's constant criticism and occasional accusations of theft made each day a test of Maya's patience and dignity. The woman had inherited her position through marriage, and perhaps to compensate for her own insecurities, wielded her authority with petty cruelty. "You missed a spot," Mrs. Sharma said that morning, running her finger along a windowsill Maya had just cleaned. She examined her fingertip with exaggerated disgust. "Honestly, I don't know why I keep you on. My sister's housekeeper is twice as efficient and doesn't smell of poverty." Maya bit her tongue and redid the work, her mind elsewhere as her hands moved automatically. After 4 years of such treatment, she had learned to retreat into her thoughts while her body performed its duties. Today, she was calculating how many more months it would take to save enough for her father's next round of medication. The doctor in the neighboring town had warned that the current prescription was losing effectiveness. They would need to try something stronger, something more expensive. "When you've finished with that, the bathroom needs scrubbing," Mrs. Sharma called over her shoulder as she walked away, her silk sari rustling softly. "My husband's business associates are coming for dinner tonight, and everything must be perfect." Maya nodded silently, already planning how to fit all the extra tasks into her day. Mrs. Sharma's dinner parties often meant Maya would return home long after dark, her back aching, her hands raw from cleaning products. There would be no extra pay for the additional hours. As she scrubbed the already clean bathroom tiles, Maya caught her reflection in the mirror. A young woman with eyes older than her years. Her once lustrous black hair pulled back severely from a face that had forgotten how to smile easily. Sometimes she barely recognized herself. "Girl," Mrs. Sharma's voice shattered her momentary reverie. "Don't just stand there daydreaming. The gardener says there are fresh flowers ready to be cut for the table arrangements." The village had been abuzz with rumors for weeks. Something was happening, something big. Several official-looking vehicles had been spotted on the outskirts of town. Men in expensive suits had been seen taking measurements and photographs. Some said a factory was coming. Others insisted it was a resort for foreign tourists. The most pessimistic believed they would all be evicted to make way for whatever was planned. Maya had heard the whispers as she shopped in the small market, caught fragments of excited conversations between Mrs. Sharma and her equally privileged friends as they sipped tea in the garden while Maya pruned roses nearby. But she had paid little attention to the gossip. Change rarely benefited people like her family. More often, it simply created new obstacles to overcome, new systems to navigate, new ways to be excluded. "Did you hear?" Mrs. Sharma's cook whispered to Maya as they passed in the hallway. "They say it's a hospital or something like it. Big money behind it." Maya shrugged non-committally. Hope was a luxury she could ill afford. The day dragged on endlessly. Mrs. Sharma found fault with everything. The flower arrangements were too sparse. The silver wasn't polished to a sufficient shine. The floors would surely embarrass her in front of her husband's associates. By the time Maya was permitted to leave, the sun had long since set, and her entire body ached with exhaustion. As she walked home that evening, the moon casting silver light across the dusty road, Maya noticed an unusual number of people gathered in the village square. Despite her fatigue, curiosity drew her closer. The square, normally quiet at this hour, except for a few old men playing cards, was alive with voices and movement. At the center of the crowd stood the village headman, a portly man whose authority came more from his family connections than any particular leadership qualities. And beside him, a tall man in a crisp white shirt and dark trousers. Something about him seemed vaguely familiar, though Maya couldn't place him. "The foundation will begin construction next month," the stranger was saying, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd. Unlike many officials who visited their remote village, he spoke their local dialect fluently, though his accent suggested education in English medium schools. "The medical center will serve this village and the surrounding communities within a 20-kilometer radius. We estimate it will provide care for approximately 15,000 people who currently have to travel more than an hour to reach even basic medical facilities." Maya edged closer, drawn by the man's evident passion. "We'll need local workers for the construction phase," he continued. "And once it's operational, we'll be hiring staff at all levels, from maintenance to administration to support personnel. We're especially interested in employing people from the local communities." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Jobs. Good jobs, by the sound of it. Not the seasonal agricultural work or domestic service that constituted the main employment options in their area. "Additionally," the man continued, unfolding a document that gleamed white in the lamplight, "we'll be establishing a scholarship program for promising students who wish to pursue medical training. Those who complete their education will be guaranteed positions at the center." An older woman near Maya gasped softly. "My granddaughter," she whispered to no one in particular. "She's always wanted to be a nurse." Maya felt a strange tightness in her chest, a bittersweet ache. If only such an opportunity had existed years ago, when she still had dreams of becoming a doctor, when her notebooks were filled with carefully drawn diagrams of the human body copied from borrowed textbooks. Now it was too late. Her education had been interrupted for too long. Her family's needs were too immediate. The headman stepped forward, his voice booming with self-importance. "This is a great day for our village. We welcome the Malhotra Foundation and its generous investment in our community's future." The name triggered something in Maya's memory. Malhotra. She had heard it before, perhaps on the radio or in conversations at Mrs. Sharma's house. A wealthy family, industrialists with interests across the country. As the crowd began to disperse, animated discussions breaking out among small groups. Maya turned to leave. She had dinner to prepare for her family, and these grand plans had little to do with her reality. The future being described was for others, for younger students, for families with enough stability to allow their children to pursue education, for people whose circumstances hadn't already narrowed their paths to mere survival. "Excuse me," a voice called from behind her. "Miss, wait a moment, please." Maya turned, surprised to find the well-dressed stranger approaching her, weaving through the dispersing crowd with purpose. Up close, there was something even more familiar about him, though she couldn't quite place it. He had the confident bearing of someone accustomed to wealth and influence, yet none of the condescension she had come to expect from such people. "Yes," she replied cautiously, suddenly conscious of her work-worn appearance and the dust that clung to the hem of her simple cotton sari. "Your name is Maya, isn't it?" he asked, studying her face with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. His eyes were searching, almost eager. "How do you know my name?" The question came out more defensively than she'd intended, years of wariness surfacing automatically. A smile spread across his face, warm, genuine, and somehow triumphant. "You gave me water once, many years ago. I was dying on the roadside, and you sacrificed your family's water to save me." Maya stared at him, memories suddenly flooding back with startling clarity. The desperate man, his expensive clothes covered in dust. The scorching day that had seemed to warp the very air with heat. The empty bottle she'd carried home, dreading her mother's disappointment. "That was you?" He nodded, extending his hand. "Rajiv Malhotra. I've been looking for you for a very long time, Maya." She hesitated before taking his hand, the contrast between his manicured appearance and her calloused palm momentarily embarrassing her. "Looking for me? Why?" "Because you saved my life that day, and I made a promise to myself that I would repay that debt." His expression grew serious, his voice lowering slightly as if sharing a confidence. "I wasn't just any traveler who got lost in the heat. I was the son of Vikram Malhotra, the industrialist. My car had broken down miles from where it should have been. My driver had taken a shortcut without telling me and then gone for help when we ran out of fuel. I would have died if not for you." Maya stood speechless, trying to process what she was hearing. The memory, which had faded to a vague recollection of childish charity, suddenly took on new dimensions, new significance. "After that day, I tried to find you, but I didn't know your full name or exactly which village you were from. This region has dozens of similar communities." He ran a hand through his hair, a surprisingly human gesture from someone who otherwise seemed so polished. "It took years, but I never gave up. Every time our foundation planned new projects, I would insist on personally visiting the potential sites, hoping I might recognize you or that someone might know of a girl who had once helped a stranger. And now you found me," Maya said softly, still struggling to connect the successful man before her with the desperate figure from her childhood memory. "Yes." He gestured to the plans being rolled up by his assistants nearby. "This medical center is part of my family's foundation work. But I specifically chose this location because I finally tracked you down. A teacher from your old school, Mrs. Lakshmi, I believe, mentioned a particularly bright student who had to leave education to support her family. When she described you and your circumstances, I knew it had to be you." "I don't understand," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You built this entire medical center because of me? Not just because of you, he corrected gently. This region needs medical facilities desperately. The statistics on maternal mortality, preventable childhood diseases, and untreated chronic conditions in this area are shameful for a country with India's resources. But yes, finding you was a powerful motivation. He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. Maya, I'd like to offer you something. A position at the foundation, working with our education initiative. Your village headman tells me you were once the most promising student in the school. Maya felt dizzy, as if the ground beneath her feet had suddenly shifted. The lamplight seemed too bright, the night air too thin. But I didn't finish school. I haven't studied in years. I wouldn't know where to begin. We can arrange for you to complete your education while you work with us. Special tutoring, flexible hours, whatever it takes. His eyes held hers steadily. It won't be easy. You'll have to work harder than you ever have before. You'll be catching up on years of lost education while simultaneously learning new skills. But if you're willing to try... The ember of hope that had nearly died inside Maya suddenly flared to life, a sensation so unexpected and powerful that she felt tears threatening. She blinked them back fiercely, unwilling to appear emotional or weak. My family depends on my income. I can't just... The position comes with a stipend that would exceed what you're currently earning. He interrupted gently. And we could find suitable work for your brothers as well, if they're interested. The construction phase will need many hands. Maya's mind raced, calculating possibilities that had been unthinkable just moments before. Her father's medical care, her brother's futures, her mother's constant worry about their next meal. Could all of it really change so suddenly? Why? She asked, her voice breaking slightly despite her efforts at control. Why would you do this for me? Rajiv's expression softened, and for a moment, Maya could see in him the vulnerable stranger she had helped years ago. Because 8 years ago, you didn't ask who I was or what I could give you in return. You simply saw a person in need and gave everything you had. He smiled again. Some debts can never be fully repaid, Maya. But I'd like to try. A small crowd had gathered at a respectful distance, villagers watching the unexpected interaction with undisguised curiosity. Maya became aware of whispers, of speculative glances. Tomorrow, this conversation would be dissected in every home, embellished in every retelling. Mrs. Sharma would hear of it and would either dismiss her immediately out of jealousy or become sickeningly obsequious if she realized Maya's connection to the Malhotra family. I need time to think, Maya said finally. It's too much to process all at once. Rajiv nodded, reaching into his pocket for a business card. Of course. Take all the time you need. He handed her the card, its embossed lettering catching the light. My personal number is on the back. Call me when you've decided, or if you have any questions. As he turned to rejoin his colleagues, he paused. Maya, whatever you decide, thank you. Not just for what you did years ago, but for reminding me of what truly matters. My father built his empire focusing solely on profit margins and market share. I want my legacy to be different. As the stars began to appear in the white, darkening sky above them, Maya clutched the business card tightly, feeling something she hadn't experienced in years. Possibility. The future, which had seemed as fixed and unchangeable as the drought-hardened earth beneath her feet, suddenly stretched before her, filled with unexpected paths and doorways. She thought of the water bottle, empty in her small hands all those years ago. How could she have known that such a simple act would ripple through time, returning to her in this moment of transformation? Her mother's words echoed in her memory. Kindness is never wasted, even when it costs us. And all because, years ago, she had given water to a stranger. Maya stood outside her family's modest home, the business card still clutched in her hand, long after Rajiv Malhotra had departed. The night air carried the scent of cooking fires and jasmine, familiar comforts that now seemed to belong to a life she was already leaving behind. Her mind raced with possibilities, fears, and questions that had no easy answers. The weight of the decision before her felt almost physical, pressing down upon her shoulders as the stars emerged in the darkening sky. The card itself was a tangible symbol of everything she had never dared to hope for. Thick, cream-colored stock with embossed lettering that caught the moonlight. The Malhotra Foundation, it proclaimed in elegant script, with Rajiv's title and contact information below. She ran her thumb over the raised letters, feeling the quality of something meant to impress, to convey importance. How strange that such a small rectangle of paper could represent such an enormous crossroads in her life. When she finally entered the house, her family was waiting. News traveled quickly in their small village, and already the whispers had reached them. Maya had spoken with the important visitor, the rich man from the city who was building the medical center. Something significant had happened, though the details were still unclear in the retelling. Her mother had lit an extra oil lamp, its warm glow illuminating their expectant faces. "Is it true?" her mother asked, her weathered face a mixture of hope and apprehension. The lines around her eyes deepened as she leaned forward, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Sunita's husband said the Malhotra man knew you from before." Maya sank onto the woven mat beside her father, whose curious eyes belied his frail appearance. His breathing was labored tonight, the persistent cough having exhausted him. But he had refused to rest until Maya returned with news. Her brothers sat cross-legged against the wall, their usual restless energy subdued by the palpable tension in the room. She told them everything, the waters she had given years ago, Rajiv's search for her, and the offer that now lay before her like an unopened gift, tantalizing but frightening in its potential to change everything. As she spoke, she watched their expressions shift from disbelief to wonder to cautious optimism. "It seems too good to be true," her father said when she had finished, his voice thin but thoughtful. He paused to suppress a cough, wincing slightly at the effort. "In my experience, when the wealthy offer something to people like us, there are always strings attached. What does he really want from you, this Malhotra man?" The question hung in the air, giving voice to Maya's own unspoken doubts. In their world, generosity from the powerful often came with hidden costs, expectations that revealed themselves only after it was too late to refuse. "He seemed sincere," Maya replied, though her father's caution resonated with her own uncertainty. The way he spoke about that day, about the water, it meant something to him. Not just that I helped him, but how I did it without asking for anything in return. She hesitated, trying to articulate the impression Rajiv had made on her. But even if his intentions are good, am I capable of what he's offering? I've been away from studies for so long. What if I fail? What if I embarrass myself and all of you? Her younger brother Devesh leaned forward. "But Maya, you were always the smartest in your class. Mrs. Lakshmi used to tell everyone you would go to university someday." "That was a long time ago," Maya said softly, before reality got in the way. Her mother, who had been listening silently, rose and moved to the small wooden trunk in the corner of the room. The trunk contained their few precious possessions: documents, the gold earrings that had been her wedding gift, a shawl that had belonged to her grandmother. From it, she withdrew a faded cloth bundle tied with string and returned to place it in Maya's lap. "Open it," she instructed softly. Maya untied the string with careful fingers. Inside the cloth was a stack of papers, her school certificates, reports, and awards, preserved carefully despite years of hardship when even keeping the next meal seemed uncertain. The sight of them, these tangible remnants of her former self, caught her off guard. She had assumed they had been discarded long ago, sacrificed like so many other non-essentials. "You kept these?" she whispered, lifting a certificate from her 10th year. The paper yellowed, but the red distinction mark still bright. "We never stopped believing in you," her mother said, her voice steady despite the tears gathering in her eyes. "Even when you had to leave school, even when you stopped believing in yourself, we knew who you were, who you are, beneath the circumstances that have shaped our lives." Maya's fingers trembled as she sifted through the papers. Here was the essay that had won district recognition. There, the mathematics competition certificate signed by the state education minister. Fragments of a self she had gradually relinquished, surrendered to necessity one piece at a time, until she could barely remember the girl who had earned these accolades. "I remember that one," her father said, pointing to a particular certificate. "You came home so excited that day. You talked about becoming a doctor for hours." Maya nodded, the memory surfacing like a long submerged object finally breaking the water's surface. I had just learned about vaccines, how something so small could protect entire communities from disease. It seemed like magic to me then. Her brothers, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. "You should do it, Maya," Arjun said, his 17-year-old face suddenly solemn with conviction. "You've sacrificed enough for us. It's time you had your chance. We can take care of things here," Devesh added, his young face suddenly determined, seeming older than his 15 years. "If these construction jobs are real, we can earn enough for Father's medicine. Maybe even save a little. And I can take on more sewing work," her mother added. "Mrs. Patel has been asking me to help with wedding clothes for her daughter." Maya looked around at her family, the people for whom she had set aside her own dreams, year after year. In their eyes, she saw not the burden of expectation, but a reflection of her own unrealized potential, preserved in their hearts, even as she had forgotten it. They had never seen her as merely a provider, a dutiful daughter sacrificing for their welfare. They had held space for the Maya who might have been, safeguarding that possibility even when circumstances made it seem impossible. "I'm afraid," she admitted, the words difficult to speak aloud. Vulnerability was a luxury she rarely permitted herself. "What if I can't do it? What if I've changed too much, lost too much time?" Her father reached for her hand, his grip weaker than it once had been, but still steady. "Of course you are. Fear is what we feel when we stand at the edge of something important." He squeezed her fingers gently. "But remember, Maya, fear and courage are not opposites. They are companions. The brave person is not one who feels no fear, but one who continues despite it." That night, long after her family had gone to sleep, Maya sat in the doorway of their home, looking out at the village under moonlight. The same houses, the same paths she had walked thousands of times, the same rhythm of life that had defined her existence for 20 years. If she accepted Rajiv's offer, Nothing would look the same again. Not the village, not her family, not herself. Was she ready for such transformation? Could she bear the weight of possibility after so many years of carefully managed expectations? The decision did not come easily. For 3 days, Maya continued her work at Mrs. Sharma's, enduring the woman's increasingly bitter comments about ungrateful servants who might abandon their posts for false promises. The wealthy woman had clearly heard about Maya's conversation with Rajiv Malhotra, and her reaction vacillated between dismissive skepticism and poorly concealed anxiety that she might lose her most reliable worker. These city people make grand promises they never intend to keep, Mrs. Sharma remarked pointedly as Maya polished silverware for an upcoming dinner party. Remember your place, girl? People like us don't suddenly become educated professionals. It's not the natural order of things. Maya kept her eyes on her work, refusing to give Mrs. Sharma the satisfaction of a response. The words stung nonetheless, touching the very doubts that kept her awake at night. Was she reaching beyond her proper place? Was she setting herself up for humiliation and disappointment? In the evenings, she pored over her old school notebooks, trying to recapture knowledge that had once come so naturally to her. Mathematical formulas that had once flowed effortlessly from her mind now required concentrated effort to recall. English vocabulary that she had once proudly mastered now seemed foreign on her tongue. How much had she lost in these years of intellectual dormancy? How much could be recovered? She found herself watching the construction vehicles arriving at the site of the future medical center. Large machines breaking ground where empty fields had stood for generations. Change was coming to their village, regardless of her decision. The question was whether she would be part of that change or merely witness it from the sidelines. On the 4th day, as dawn broke over the village, Maya walked to the small temple at the edge of town. The ancient stone structure had stood for centuries, witnessing countless prayers and decisions. She sat on the worn steps, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. The cool morning air carried the scent of marigolds and incense from early offerings. An elderly priest emerged, his white dhoti and simple cotton shawl a testament to his lifelong devotion. He nodded to Maya in recognition, having known her since childhood. Heavy thoughts for such a young heart, he observed, settling beside her with the unhurried movements of one who has learned the value of deliberate action. I've been offered a chance to become someone different, Maya explained, finding comfort in the priest's quiet presence. But I'm not sure if that person still exists inside me. What if I've waited too long? What if I've forgotten how to dream beyond mere survival? The old man smiled, the sunlight catching the silver of his hair. The lotus grows from the mud toward the light. Its nature doesn't change. It simply fulfills what was always possible. He gestured toward the temple pond, where lotus flowers were indeed opening to the morning sun, their pink petals emerging immaculate from the murky water below. The mud is not a prison, but the very foundation from which beauty rises. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the village come to life around them. Women carrying water vessels, farmers heading to their fields, children beginning their walk to the school where Maya had once excelled. My father always said that education was the one thing that couldn't be taken from you, Maya said finally. That once knowledge enters your mind, it belongs to you forever. A wise man, your father, the priest replied. And he is right. The seeds of knowledge may lie dormant, but they do not die. They wait for the right conditions to grow again. As the morning light strengthened, Maya made her decision. She would call the number on the card. She would step into the unknown, not despite her fear, but carrying it with her as a reminder of how far she had come and how much this opportunity meant. The path ahead would not be easy, but perhaps that was precisely why she needed to walk it. When she returned home to share her decision, her family embraced her with a mixture of pride and sadness. They all understood that regardless of what happened next, things would never be quite the same again. The familiar patterns of their lives together would shift, reconfigure into something new and untested. "You will always have a home here," her mother whispered fiercely as they embraced. "Remember that, no matter how far you go." That afternoon, Maya used the village's only public telephone to call Rajiv Malhotra. The shop owner, normally strict about time limits, waved away her coins when she explained who she was calling. "No charge for this call," he said with unusual deference. "This is a historic day for our village." Maya's heart pounded as she dialed the number, half expecting to reach a secretary or assistant who would politely but firmly create distance between her and Rajiv. Instead, his voice, warm and immediately recognizable, answered on the second ring. "Maya," he said, her name spoken with genuine pleasure. "I've been hoping to hear from you." "I accept your offer," Maya said, her voice stronger than she expected. The decision, once made, seemed to have unlocked a certainty within her that had been absent during days of deliberation. "But I have conditions." There was a brief pause, then what sounded like a soft chuckle. "I'm listening," Rajiv replied, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Whatever position I earn must be based on merit, not charity. I don't want special treatment beyond the opportunity to learn." She took a deep breath, aware of the shop owner pretending not to listen nearby. "And my family's welfare must be secured, not through handouts, but through fair employment for my brothers and proper medical care for my father." "Those aren't conditions, Maya. They're principles I respect." His tone grew more serious. "But I have a condition of my own. You must promise to be patient with yourself. The path ahead won't be easy, and there will be days when you doubt everything. On those days, remember that I've seen what you're capable of, even if you've forgotten." The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of changes that transformed Maya's life with breathtaking speed. She gave notice to Mrs. Sharma, who alternated between dire predictions of Maya's failure and transparent attempts to ingratiate herself with someone now connected to the powerful Malhotra family. "If you ever need a recommendation, of course I would be happy to provide one," Mrs. Sharma offered with newfound generosity on Maya's last day. "And do remember us when the medical center is looking for suppliers. My husband's cousin imports the finest medical equipment from Germany." Maya nodded politely, marveling at how quickly power dynamics could shift. The woman who had once made her scrub already clean floors as punishment for imagined infractions now spoke to her almost as an equal. It was a lesson in how the world operated, one that Maya filed away carefully in her growing understanding of social currencies. The foundation arranged for Maya's brothers to join the construction team, with fair wages paid weekly rather than the uncertain day labor they had relied upon before. Arjun, always mechanically inclined, showed particular aptitude for operating the smaller construction equipment and was soon receiving additional training. Devesh, more academically oriented like Maya, was assigned to the site office, where he assisted with inventory and basic record keeping. Maya's father was examined by a specialist brought in from the city, who prescribed a new treatment regimen that offered real hope of improvement rather than merely managing his decline. The chronic lung condition that had plagued him for years was not curable, the doctor explained, but with proper medication and therapy, its progression could be significantly slowed, and his quality of life improved. Why wasn't this treatment offered before? Maya asked, struggling to contain her anger at the years of suffering that might have been mitigated. The specialist, a woman not much older than Maya herself, answered with frank honesty. Because it's expensive, and because rural health care in this region is 20 years behind urban centers. That's why this medical center is so important. It's not just about treating illness. It's about addressing systemic inequities in healthcare access. For the first time in years, Maya saw her mother laugh without the shadow of worry darkening her eyes. With both sons employed and Maya's new position with the foundation providing a stable income, the constant pressure of financial precarity began to ease. Small luxuries became possible. A new sari for her mother, proper shoes for her brothers, a comfortable chair for her father to sit outside and enjoy the evening air. As for Maya herself, she began an intensive program designed to bridge the gaps in her education while introducing her to the work of the foundation. 5 days a week, she traveled to the nearest town where the foundation had established temporary offices while the medical center was under construction. There, she divided her time between tutoring sessions in mathematics, science, and English, and practical training in the foundation's community health education initiatives. The learning curve was steep. And there were nights when she cried from frustration and exhaustion, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. Concepts that her younger classmates grasped quickly sometimes took her days of concentrated effort to master. Her hands, accustomed to physical labor, struggled with the precision required for computer work. Her voice, trained to deference and quiet efficiency, faltered when she was asked to present ideas in group settings. "I can't do this," she confessed to Rajiv during one particularly difficult week, when a failed assessment had left her questioning everything. They sat in his office, the wall behind him covered with maps marking the foundation's projects across the country. "I'm trying to become someone I'm not." Rajiv considered her words carefully before responding. "No, Maya. You're trying to become who you always were, beneath the layers of circumstance and necessity." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Do you know what I see when I look at you? Not just the girl who gave water to a stranger, but a woman of extraordinary resilience. You've survived conditions that would break most people, and you've done it without losing your compassion or your integrity. But surviving isn't the same as succeeding," Maya argued. "What if I'm simply not capable of this level of work anymore? What if those years away from education damaged something permanently? Then we adjust. We find a different path forward." He smiled, the expression softening his otherwise serious face. "But I don't believe that's the case. The mind is remarkably adaptable. Give yourself time." And gradually, imperceptibly at first, things began to change. Mathematical concepts that had seemed impenetrable started to make sense. Her English vocabulary expanded, words becoming tools rather than obstacles. The computer, once an intimidating mystery, became a familiar ally in her daily work. But there were also moments of exhilaration when knowledge clicked into place, when she contributed ideas that were valued and implemented, when she caught glimpses of the person she might become. The first time she successfully developed a health education module for local schools, explaining complex medical concepts in accessible language. She felt a surge of purpose that transcended mere accomplishment. "This is excellent work," her supervisor commented, reviewing the materials Maya had created. "You have a gift for translation, not just between languages, but between worlds. You understand both the medical information and the community's perspective." Maya realized that what she had once perceived as her greatest disadvantage, her years of interrupted education and manual labor, had given her insights that her more privileged colleagues lacked. She understood the daily realities of the people the medical center would serve in ways that could not be taught in classrooms or boardrooms. 3 months after that fateful evening in the village square, Maya stood at the construction site of the medical center, reviewing architectural plans with the project manager. The foundation walls were already in place, concrete and steel rising from the earth in a promise of what was to come. The monsoon season had brought delays, but work was again progressing steadily, the skeleton of the building taking shape against the horizon. Maya had developed a habit of visiting the site weekly, watching the physical manifestation of change in her community emerge from what had once been empty fields. Today, she was particularly interested in the community education spaces, making notes on how the planned layout might be optimized for the programs she was helping to develop. "Ms. Maya," called a young woman, hurrying toward her, carefully navigating the muddy ground in her school uniform. Priya was one of the local students selected for the medical scholarship program, her enthusiasm for learning reminiscent of Maya's own at that age. At 16, she already spoke confidently about becoming a pediatrician and returning to serve her community. "The new textbooks have arrived, and Mr. Malhotra is here for the community meeting. He was asking for you." Maya nodded, making a final note on the plans before handing them back to the manager. "Thank you, Priya. How are your studies going?" The girl's face lit up. "Very well. The biology teacher says I have a natural aptitude for understanding systems, and I've been practicing English every day, just as you suggested." "It shows," Maya replied with genuine approval. "Your confidence has improved significantly." As she walked with Priya toward the temporary offices, Maya caught sight of Rajiv speaking with a group of village elders near the entrance. The conversation appeared animated, with several of the older men gesturing toward different areas of the construction site. Rajiv was listening attentively, occasionally asking questions that prompted further discussion. He looked up, meeting her gaze across the distance, and smiled in recognition. There was something in that smile, respect perhaps, or shared understanding, that affirmed the journey they had both undertaken since that day on a dusty road years ago. He excused himself from the elders and walked toward her, his formal business attire somewhat incongruous against the rural backdrop. "Maya, perfect timing. I was hoping to get your input on the community outreach strategy for the opening ceremonies. The elders have some concerns about how we're engaging the more traditional segments of the village." In that moment, Maya realized that while she was still walking the path between who she had been and who she might become, she was no longer afraid of the journey. The water she had given years ago had not just saved a life. It had created a current that now carried her toward a future she was finally ready to embrace. Behind her lay the life of sacrifice and limited horizons. Ahead lay uncertainty, challenge, and possibility. And here, in this present moment, was the simple truth that had started it all. Sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness contain within them the seeds of transformation, waiting only for the right season to bloom. As she joined Rajiv and the elders, offering her unique perspective that bridged their world and his, Maya felt a profound sense of rightness. The journey would continue to be difficult, with obstacles she could not yet imagine and challenges that would test her newfound confidence. But for the first time in years, she was moving forward rather than merely enduring, creating rather than simply surviving. The medical center rising from the earth was not just a building of concrete and steel. It was a monument to possibility, to the power of recognition, to the enduring impact of compassion freely given. And Maya, once a girl with an empty water bottle and a full heart, was becoming a woman whose life would testify to the truth that no act of kindness, however small, is ever truly lost. 6 months had passed since Maya accepted Rajiv's offer, and the landscape of her life had transformed in ways she could scarcely have imagined. The medical center, now nearly complete, stood as a physical embodiment of that transformation, its modern architecture rising from the rural surroundings like a promise made manifest. Maya stood at the window of her new office, a small but functional space in the administrative wing, watching workers install the sign above the main entrance. Malhotra Foundation Rural Health Institute. Soon, the temporary facilities where she had spent countless hours learning and preparing would be vacated, and the real work would begin. Quite a view, isn't it? Dr. Sharma, no relation to her former employer, appeared in the doorway. As the medical director of the new facility, he had become Maya's mentor and champion, recognizing in her not just intelligence, but a profound understanding of the community they aim to serve. It still doesn't seem entirely real, Maya admitted, turning from the window. Sometimes I expect to wake up and find myself back in Mrs. Sharma's kitchen, scrubbing pots. Dr. Sharma smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling behind wire-rimmed glasses. The imposter syndrome never fully disappears, you know. Even after 30 years as a physician, I still have moments of disbelief that they let me cut people open and put them back together. Maya laughed, grateful for his candor. In the beginning, she had been intimidated by his credentials. Education at prestigious institutions, publications in international journals, years of practice in London before returning to India. But he had quickly proven himself to be without pretension, genuinely committed to rural healthcare and to mentoring promising staff like Maya. The community health education program launches next week, Maya said, gesturing to the carefully organized materials on her desk. 25 local women have registered for the first training session. And you're prepared? As much as I can be. She touched the binder containing her presentation notes, revised countless times over the past month. I've tried to anticipate their questions, their concerns, but I know there will be challenges I haven't foreseen. Dr. Sharma nodded approvingly. That awareness is precisely why you're the right person for this role. You understand that expertise isn't just about having answers. It's about knowing how to find them when you don't. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Priya, who had blossomed from a promising student into a confident young woman over the past months, stood with a tablet in hand. Sorry to interrupt, but Mr. Malhotra has arrived for the staff meeting, and he's asking for both of you. The meeting room was already filled with the core team that would launch the Institute's operations. Physicians recruited from urban centers who had committed to rural service, nurses from nearby communities, administrative staff, and technical specialists. Maya still felt a flutter of disbelief whenever she took her place among them, though she had earned that seat through months of dedicated work and rapid learning. Rajiv stood at the head of the table, his usual formal attire replaced by a more casual button-down shirt and slacks. The change in appearance somehow made him more approachable, less the wealthy benefactor, and more the committed partner in their shared mission. Thank you all for being here today, he began, his gaze moving around the room and pausing briefly on Maya with a small nod of acknowledgement. We are 2 weeks from the official opening, and there's still much to coordinate. But before we dive into logistics, I want to take a moment to reflect on why we're here. He dimmed the lights, and a projection appeared on the wall behind him, a map of the region with color-coded indicators representing various health metrics, The picture it painted was sobering. Maternal mortality rates far above the national average. Childhood immunization coverage well below targets. Chronic diseases largely unmanaged. This is why we built here, Rajiv continued, his voice solemn. Not because it was convenient or strategically advantageous, but because it was necessary. Each of those data points represents real people. Mothers, children, families, whose lives have been diminished or cut short by lack of access to quality health care. Maya felt a tightness in her throat as she studied the map. Behind the clinical statistics, she could see faces, her neighbors, childhood friends, elders from her village. People who had suffered quietly, accepting their fate as inevitable, rather than the result of systemic inequity. But this, Rajiv said, switching to a new slide showing the Institute's projected impact over 5 years, is what we can change together. Not overnight, and not without setbacks, but systematically, persistently, and with unwavering commitment to the communities we serve. The meeting proceeded with updates from each department, discussions of remaining challenges, and finalization of plans for the opening ceremony. Maya presented the Community Education Initiative, fielding questions with growing confidence, no longer the hesitant newcomer, but a valued contributor with unique insights. As the meeting concluded and staff dispersed to their respective responsibilities, Rajiv approached Maya. "Walk with me?" he suggested, gesturing toward the door. "I'd like to see how the residential quarters are coming along." They strolled through corridors that still smelled of fresh paint and new flooring, passing rooms where medical equipment was being installed and calibrated. The residential wing, designed to house visiting specialists and staff from distant areas, was in its final stages of completion. "Your family's well?" Rajiv asked as they walked. Though his tone was casual, Maya knew his interest was genuine. He had made a point of checking on her family's welfare throughout her transition. "Very well," Maya replied, unable to keep the pride from her voice. "My father's health has improved significantly with the new treatment regimen. He can now walk to the village center without becoming winded. And my brothers..." She smiled, thinking of their transformation. "Arjun has been accepted into the technical training program in Pune. He leaves next month to study electrical engineering. And Devesh? He's determined to follow in my footsteps. He's preparing for entrance exams to study public health management. The Foundation's scholarship program has given him hope he never thought possible." Rajiv nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. "And your mother? Is she adjusting to all these changes?" Maya's smile faltered slightly. "It's been more difficult for her. Her entire life has been defined by struggle and sacrifice. Now, with prosperity coming to our family so suddenly, she sometimes seems lost, as if she's not sure of her purpose anymore." "That's not uncommon," Rajiv observed thoughtfully. "When survival is no longer the primary focus, people often face existential questions they never had the luxury to consider before." They reached the end of the corridor, where large windows overlooked the garden being landscaped with medicinal plants native to the region, another of Maya's initiatives, combining traditional knowledge with modern healthcare. "Maya," Rajiv said, his tone shifting to something more serious, "there's something I've been meaning to discuss with you." She turned to face him, curious at the change in his demeanor. "The Foundation's Board of Directors meets next month in Mumbai. I'd like you to attend and present the community integration model you've developed. It has potential applications across all our rural healthcare initiatives." Maya blinked in surprise. "The board? But I'm not, I've only been with the foundation for 6 months, Rajiv finished, for her. During which you've created an innovative approach to community engagement that addresses the very issues that have caused similar projects to fail elsewhere. Your work deserves recognition, and the board needs to hear directly from the person who conceived it. The old fear surfaced briefly. The nagging doubt that she didn't belong in such rarefied spaces, that her background would somehow mark her as an imposter among the educated elite. But she pushed it aside, remembering Dr. Sharma's words about imposter syndrome being a universal experience. "I would be honored," she said finally, "though I'll need guidance on how to present effectively to such an audience." "Of course. Dr. Sharma and I will help you prepare." Rajiv's expression softened. "You know, when I first found you again and offered you this opportunity, I believed in your potential. But you've exceeded even my highest expectations, Maya. You've not just adapted to this new world, you've begun to reshape it." Before she could respond, his phone chimed with an incoming call. He checked the screen and sighed. "I need to take this. Board politics," he explained with a grimace. "We'll talk more later about the presentation." As he walked away, answering the call with practiced diplomacy, Maya remained by the window, gazing out at the garden where workers were carefully placing plants according to the design she had helped create. The journey from that first conversation in the village square to this moment had been arduous, filled with challenges that had tested her resolve daily. There had been academic concepts to master, professional skills to develop, and perhaps most difficult, the psychological adjustment to seeing herself as capable and worthy of the opportunities before her. Yet for every obstacle, there had been unexpected joys, the thrill of understanding complex concepts, the satisfaction of creating programs that would genuinely improve lives, the deep connections formed with colleagues who shared her commitment to service. Maya's thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of a small delegation from the village. Women who had been selected as the first community health workers to be trained at the institute. Among them was her mother, who had surprised everyone by volunteering for the program. "Maya," her mother called, waving as the group approached. The other women regarded Maya with a mixture of pride and lingering amazement that one of their own now occupied such a position. "Welcome," Maya greeted them, automatically switching from English to their local dialect. "Let me show you where the training will take place." As she led them through the building, explaining the facilities and answering questions, Maya observed her mother's quiet attentiveness. Gone was the defeated posture of years of hardship, replaced by a dignified engagement with this new chapter in their lives. "You've created something important here," her mother said later, when the other women had dispersed for a tour of the medical departments. They stood alone in the community education room, surrounded by posters illustrating basic health concepts in accessible visual formats. Another of Maya's innovations. "I'm just one part of a much larger effort," Maya demurred. Her mother shook her head, the gray in her hair catching the afternoon light. "No. This place would exist without you, yes. But it would be different. It would not have your understanding of our people, our ways." She touched one of the posters, which depicted proper hand-washing techniques using cultural references familiar to local villagers. "You speak both languages now, theirs and ours. That is a rare gift." Maya felt tears threatening at this unexpected validation. Her mother had always been loving but rarely demonstrative, shaped by a life where practicality took precedence over emotional expression. "I'm proud to be part of the health worker program," her mother continued. At first, I volunteered because I thought it would please you. But now I see that I can contribute something valuable. These hands," she held up her work-worn palms, "have delivered babies, treated fevers, set bones when no doctor was available. That knowledge matters." "It does?" Maya agreed, suddenly understanding her mother's earlier sense of displacement. Modern medicine has much to learn from traditional practices. That integration is essential to what we're trying to build here. Later that evening, as Maya walked home to the small house she now rented near the Institute, she reflected on the day's conversations. The path before her was clearer now than it had ever been. Not just a career trajectory, but a purpose that wove together all the threads of her experience. The water she had given to Rajiv years ago had indeed created ripples that continued to expand outward, touching lives far beyond her own. But what she was building now was not merely the result of that single act of kindness or Rajiv's subsequent generosity. It was the product of her own determination, her willingness to step into discomfort and uncertainty, her refusal to be defined by limitations others had placed upon her. As the Institute's lights glowed behind her in the gathering dusk, Maya felt a profound sense of alignment between who she had been and who she was becoming, between her past struggles and her future aspirations, between the community that had shaped her and the broader world she now helped to shape. The medical center rising against the darkening sky was more than a building of concrete and steel. It was a testament to possibility, to the truth that circumstances need not determine destiny, that compassion can transcend boundaries of class and privilege, that knowledge shared becomes power multiplied. And Maya, once a girl with dreams deferred by necessity, was now a woman with the capacity to help others transform their own stories. The journey had only just begun, but the Yaj foundation, both literal and figurative, was firmly in place.